Hello, hello. Welcome back to our show and action. This is Ricky Borba. I am here tonight with my friend, fellow thespian, amazing man. We're going to talk about a lot of fun things tonight. Mr. Robert Lasardo. Robert, thank you for being here.
Thank you. Hi, Ricky.
Hi, buddy. It's been too long. I think the last time I saw you was actually at my house when we were filming a film we're going to talk about later tonight, but it's good to see you, man. You look great. First of all, my first question, Robert, is how are things going? How are you and Alicia handling the pandemic? What's going on with your life?
I went on a hike the other day
Oh, that's good. Where'd you go?
up into Malibu Canyon.
Wow. And so had the fire started then, or was it pre-fires?
Yeah, I didn't see any smoke
Oh,
that
that's
day.
good.
I got lucky that day.
Yeah.
Saw
It's
some
been,
lizards, though.
you saw some lizards?
Saw some butterflies. Saw tarantula, too.
Ooh, so
Pretty
being
cool.
out in nature, getting to see the creation, that's pretty awesome.
I dig it, man.
Yeah, me too, brother. Robert, we're going to go through so much stuff of you tonight. I'm so excited. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get it. We're going to do this a few times. I'm going to plug your book. You've got a book out called Life Sentence. Brian is going to put the link in the comment section on Facebook and stuff like that. But Robert, this is a fabulous book, just a really deep, insightful look into your life. And here's something I find interesting. Whenever I say that I did a film with Robert, or like today when I say we're going to do an interview tonight, people's first reactions are, I love that guy. I love that guy. And then I say, well, why? And they say, well, various reasons. But Robert, my first question to you is, you are typically a guy known for the bravado in your roles, yet you've got all these people who love you for various reasons. What do you attribute that to? Because I have a reason what I think that's about. Why do you think people love you so much? I'll give you why I think. I think it's because you are a kind soul that brings such depth to your roles that people can relate whether you're playing the good guy or the bad guy. They see genuine acting, genuine emotion, genuine feeling coming from you. What do you think about that?
I like it.
Yeah? You like
I
that
like
answer?
it.
All right. He
I
likes that
like it.
answer. Robert, let's start talking. Let's back up. We're going to talk about your childhood. And I think it's fair to say your childhood, the family structure in your life at the time when you were a young man growing up was not ideal, I would say.
Well, someone once said that, someone, because this isn't me, but I heard this said by someone who I respect. And he said sometimes the best parents are the worst parents
Hmm.
because they leave you to kind of figure it out on your own.
Sure.
And so in that sense, they served me well.
I've heard it said that sometimes you learn what to do from your parents, and sometimes you learn what not to do from your parents. And I think when people read your book, and we're talking about family, not just parents and things like that, but you sometimes from your family, your intimate circle, you learn how not to do things sometimes, but sometimes that can be a blessing in disguise, as you just said.
Well, you say blessing, and immediately I think of the Bible. There's a verse in it that says, a man's enemies will be members of his own family. So I don't know. You can interpret that however you like. I guess it's all relative, but
I,
not
I
to cast judgment on that dynamic, patriarch, matriarch. You just are given what you're given, and
yeah.
either you make lemonade or you don't. And life throws at everyone all sorts of stuff to get creative with.
Yeah, amen to that. I agree. I think in my life, looking through what I've been through and my upbringing with my family, definitely created what you were just talking about. And sometimes your family can be your biggest supporters. Sometimes they can be your biggest enemies. But if you do as you did, and I believe how I've done in my life, and respond well to that, then you can put yourself in a position to be in a place to achieve your dreams and go after something special, which you're doing, I'm doing, and a lot of people watching want to do. We're going to get to that thing, acting, making films. But I want to talk about after your upbringing and the hardships that was, you joined the armed services. And not a lot of people know this, but you train dogs. If you just talk about that for a little bit, about what that was like and how that kind of, I don't want to, well, I'll just let you talk. Go ahead, Robert.
I think it was very, it was, no, I know it was very fulfilling to be allowed to work with the canine unit. When I completed boot camp, I received orders to travel to the Aleutian Islands. Back in the 1980s, the theory was, because this was during the Cold War, so the theory was that if the Russians invaded the United States, that they would come through the Aleutian Islands, down the Aleutian chain. And so there were these strategic posts, these listening posts. And one of the islands was called Adak, and that's where I was sent to be stationed. And when I arrived there, I was a bit concerned because it was pretty much an isolation duty base. I mean, it was just mountains and mountains of snow and no trees and just an abyss. So I thought, okay, 2 years on this rock, basically about 800 miles off the coast of Siberia. And I thought, okay, I really got my work cut out for me in terms of keeping my sanity. It wasn't like I imagined, because I joined the Navy, so I thought that joining the Navy at first would allow me the opportunity to travel around the world, and see exotic places and stuff like that. But the first 2 years was quite a shock to recognize that circumstance. And I think when I was placed in the security division and they asked me if I wanted to basically train with the dogs, I said yes. And so that started it. And to make a long story short, they flew me with a dog. His name was King. He was half German Shepherd, half Doberman. They flew myself and the dog to Lackland Air Force Base to get certified, so that I could legally utilize the dog like a weapon on the island of Adak, to deal with the various responsibilities that the job required. One of them was basically searching luggage. Once planes landed on the island, I would take the dog and search people's luggage, search the planes for contraband, things like that, because my dog was dual purpose. He was a tack dog plus also a drug sniffing dog. So I was part of what they called narcotics interdiction team. Narcotics interdiction. So once I completed my training 7-week course in Lackland Air Force Base, they flew me back to the Aleutian Islands, back to Adak with the dog, and I was basically, on the job, taking the dog around the barracks, doing perimeter watches, playing war games with the Marines that were stationed on the islands, the UDT, the SEALs, the Navy SEALs would come in and try to infiltrate the island. We'd try to track them with the dog. So that part of the tour was very exciting, and it helped to deal with the monotony of being in this isolation, this place that was just, you were felt enveloped by isolation. And so to have an opportunity to have this kind of rock star position, so to speak, not on board a ship or, something more of a situation of mediocrity. It was more, I was given power to basically over people that had higher ranks than me, simply because I wore the badge, carried a gun, and had I was canine and part of narcotics interdiction team. So
Wow.
yeah, it was quite glamorous for the 1.5 or 2 years that I spent on the island.
And there's so much that I would love to extract from that, and also from your life getting to you becoming an actor. But how did you transition from that, which is not at all ever going to be the typical road someone takes to becoming an actor? What were the steps you took from that experience to your first couple acting jobs, which we will talk about in detail in a minute? But what was the transition, Robert?
I don't know if there's such thing as a typical road to a career in the performing arts.
That's fair.
I wonder about that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think what I meant was sometimes people will go to acting school, they'll take classes, they'll go get a degree in performing arts. Rarely do you hear, I can think of Adam Driver, I can think of you. If I really sat here and thought, I could probably think of someone else, but rarely do people go from the armed forces to acting. So do you remember when you kind of got the bug for that, and you decided you wanted to pursue that?
Sure. Before I joined the military, I went to the High School for Performing Arts in New York City.
Yeah.
And was involved in an extensive course of that involved what did it involve? It involved, I guess, extreme regimen of
Hmm.
training that was, what was the style that I was trained in? Stanislavski,
Oh
the
yeah.
method, basically, method,
Yeah.
what they call the method. So I spent I spent 3 years studying at performing arts. And I think that's when the mechanism, probably the creative mechanism, became apparent in terms of what potentially my capabilities might be.
Yeah.
It was pointed out to me by several teachers throughout my life, one in junior high school and the other in high school, that there was a proclivity, a natural tendency to be able to communicate the drama off the
Yeah.
page in a way that was effective to my classmates. I remember the first time that happened was we put on a play in junior high school, and I was kind of beside myself observing the reactions of my classmates to what I was doing. I didn't know what the heck was going on, but it was kind of exciting to watch people react to what I was doing. And that's when the teacher, the English teacher in junior high school, recommended that I audition for the high school for performing arts. So I auditioned, I got in, and I met another teacher there who also was very diligent in terms of directing me on a course of constructive creativity that would persuade me away from some of the more destructive tendencies on the street that I was tangled up in. So it was kind of a catharsis for me to be in high school studying theater and also dealing with the shadow personality that lived outside the realm of creativity, that was a bit destructive.
Hmm. Robert, if I'm doing my math correctly, it seems like the Stanislavski method that you were learning transitioned well for you in the armed services because that was also very rigid and there was a hierarchy there. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, sure.
All right,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, I
So
mean, one thing I remember about performing arts and high school in those days in the 70s was that, even though the classroom situation was a bit loose compared to more rigid conventional structuring, the teachers that taught us were like drill instructors. They were very passionate.
yeah.
Anthony Abeson, who became my friend and mentor, he once kneeled down and kissed the stage to
Wow.
demonstrate his passion and commitment to the theater, and not to have it taken seriously ever by any of us if we were
Hmm.
going to be allowed to grace that circumstance, and we must with respect. So yeah, it was rigid, but there was a lot of love present. What the military is there's rigid and there's not a lot of love, just kind
Yeah.
of robotic. But I felt the performing arts was a combination of the two elements, and they work well together, I think.
I can attest that your presence on a film set, is very much that you are very ready to go. I don't love the word method, but you said it. You are very method. You are very in tune with the character you're playing at the time, and there is not a thing that rattles you. There is not a thing that you can't handle when a director brings it to you or a producer. And we're going to get into that when we talk about the talking tree. You know what story I'm talking about. But before we get to the talking tree, Robert, in going through your film history, a lot of people kind of think that you're synonymous with the action type, like I was talking about the bravado. But your first film was a film with Richard Pryor called Moving. And I want to hear about that. I want to hear about Richard Pryor. I want to hear about that experience for you. I believe that was 1984, if I remember correctly. I didn't write the year down.
Let's see. Got out of the Navy in 1985. 86, started auditioning.
Okay.
Booked that film in, I think, 87.
87. Okay, 87.
Yeah.
So your first film, you're with and at the time he was still a legend in 87. I mean, he'd done so many things. Richard Pryor. Robert, walk us through that. What was that like?
Well, I think it was extremely inspiring, and I needed it. You grow up in certain circumstances, and you hear a lot of voices and a concert of opinions and ideas that aren't always conducive to positive outlook. So
Yeah.
I was grateful to be in the presence of someone that didn't have any axe to grind, or could see me objectively and say some really kind things to me that I needed to hear.
Hmm.
I think we all need to hear when we're confused in terms of identity, or station in life, or what we've been led to believe about ourselves. So here I am in, on the set, standing across from Richard Pryor, which was in of itself a bit, clearly surreal to me at the time, and still is when I think about it. But it was auspicious because, like I said, I really needed to be shown in real time, actual, not theoretical, that some of the things that my acting teachers had pointed out to me, specifically Anthony Abeson at Performing Arts, were not just some pie in the sky rhetoric. It actually, the things he pointed out that would potentially manifest if I stayed focused were actually manifesting right before me. So it was beautiful in that sense, to experience it. It was also very frightening. Beware of what you wish for, as they say, because suddenly it is upon you, and like, okay, how do I process this? But you process it with gratitude and humility, and you do the work that's required. So basically, I auditioned like any other audition out of New York City. I was living there at the time. I received many callbacks, and then finally, I think it was Marion Doherty, who was the vice president of Warner Brothers Casting at the time. I think she's still maybe she's the president now of Warner Brothers Casting. But the point is, she was there and met with me, and the director and producer flew in from Hollywood. Alan Metter, who directed a film. His claim to fame was a film with Rodney Dangerfield called Back to School. And the producer at the time, Stuart Kornfeld, who went on to produce films like Tropic Thunder and Allied for quite a while with Ben Stiller, and did a lot of those movies that were very popular and successful. That was, I think, one of his earlier films that he produced, and he was very kind to me. So they met with me, and it was the final callback. So I waited 2 weeks after that, kind of wondering if I had just imagined the whole experience, because it's this yo-yoing of extreme feelings and adrenaline rush when you're called back on a project of such magnitude that's a studio picture, and you realize what the stakes are and who's involved. I mean, actors like Dana Carvey, Randy Quaid, Richard Pryor, all these people you hear, because of course the manager makes it a point to let you know what you're dealing with, to really psych you out. And so then you have to get beyond the anxiety of that situation and just keep moving. And so waiting to find out whether or not you've actually made impact, or they just didn't kill you with kindness at the auditions. If any of these callbacks have merit in terms of potentially booking the job, is what drives, I think, most actors crazy while they wait. And so I'm not unique in that sense. I also, it was a very difficult time to wait, but I got the call, and the agent at the time asked me a question. He said, "Guess who's going to Hollywood?" I said, "Who?"
Wow. And there you have it.
Yeah.
So that brings up an incredible point, that someone who's prepared, someone who knows their stuff like you, who had nailed it in the auditions, you're waiting for your callback. I'm talking to the actors that are watching you and I talk right now that are from Casting Calls America. Even at those moments where you feel like you've done a good job, there's still a sense of, did I get this? Am I really dreaming this? Did this really happen? It's never, I don't think it ever should be a drop in the bucket and you feel completely, good that you got it. There should always be, Dustin Hoffman said, every time he goes on stage, every time he does the first scene in a movie, he gets nervous. And I think there should always be an air of that when you're auditioning and when you're going for something, no matter how seasoned you are or good you are at acting, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that just means you're alive, and allowing yourself to experience things. I think too, maybe once you have some experience in the biz or the industry, you start to recognize I recognize, at least I'll speak for myself, is that you start to recognize an element of politic play, and also that the decisions that are made in terms of casting sometimes are arbitrary and unjust. And because of that variable, you can be fantastic, but it is a marketplace, and it's a product, and it's a visual medium. And so you can go in and shake the walls with your talent. But if the governing entities don't feel that in the marketplace and what they're selling, you fit into that frame appropriately, then sometimes you don't get the job. A lot of times you won't. So a lot of it has to do with what you look like as well, because it's a visual medium, right? Sure. And they're selling various personality archetypes because people believe in fairy tales or they believe in this stuff. So you have to recognize, I think, objectively where you stand in that marketplace. It doesn't define you necessarily as an artistic entity, but I think it's important to be realistic in the business model, the business frame, and to see how that operates and the way the people in power observe things, so that you learn not to take it as personal, like, oh, I failed. No, I don't think it's about failing. I think it's about recognizing that even a great fighter who trains diligently and relentlessly and does everything right still may lose that fight because maybe it wasn't his night or her night, any number of variables, or maybe next time you win. So it doesn't mean I don't think it serves anyone to dismiss the efforts of preparation that's always required, regardless of the outcome. That's, I think, what separates the hacks from,
Robert, having said that, I want to talk about how you came to be in the Talking Tree, because, we're talking about that preparation. We're talking about that deeper level of acting. I will admit, and I think you know this, when we were making the Talking Tree, I was elated to have you come aboard, but at the same time, you have been utilized to play characters that have been a bit contemptuous, tortured, and violent by nature. And so for a lot of people who don't know your earlier work, they might think that you are that guy. But I want you to talk about how you bring, because I love this when we talked about it the other day, how you bring nuance and difference to every role you play, regardless of the character being similar or different to the character you've played before.
Well, I think it's not that complicated in terms of how I see it these days. People have definitely tried to complicate it for me over the years because of whatever trip they're on. But it's like this, they can build a frame around you with the writing and the story and the ideas they may have about how they see certain types of people. And you can look at that and say, okay, that's who I am, or that's what, if this is the frame they've built around me, then does this define me? Or is it simply someone's projection of an idea that they have because they've been taught something? If you read the material, meaning the script, the dialogue, understand the circumstance you're in, and recognize that regardless of the limitations that the writing suggests, that there's something in there that speaks to a truth, then you grab hold of that. And as a performer, as an artist, your obligation is to authenticate that person and relationship to the circumstance. That's not trivial. So my point is they can manipulate the frame around me like a picture, dress it up a certain way, but they can't control ultimately how the spirit manifests within the flesh of that character. So if you believe wholeheartedly in that experience, then it communicates a truth regardless of how it stands on the pole, negative or positive. Because we all have both, don't we? We all have the shadow self. And I think in relationship to also in terms of your comment about the Talking Tree, I think it's a perfect opportunity to demonstrate some biblical principle, because if you consider Paul or some of the apostles and their past prior to meeting the Messiah,
that's right,
then it's an appropriate stage for a character like Sanchez, the character that I play in the Talking Tree, to be faced with the challenge of faith and reclamation, isn't it?
Absolutely. Robert, I'm so glad you talked about the Talking Tree and your character of Mal Sanchez. Brian, I would love to show the trailer for the Talking Tree right now so that we can talk about that right after we air it. This is the world premiere of the Talking Tree trailer.
Is it ever okay to steal food to feed your family?
You have such a good heart, but stealing is never the right thing to do.
If God is all good, then you, out of all people, would be the last person in this position.
How bad is it? These medications are only prescribed for terminally ill patients.
I'm not worried about me. I'm worried about you.
These drugs are not even covered on your mother's insurance.
My client, he's a good man.
Your client robbed a bank.
I'm so sorry.
Mr. Petros, you are hereby sentenced to a maximum of 5 years in federal prison.
You really love Christmas, huh?
Special things are meant to happen this time of year.
You are mine now, Danny boy.
Isolation is the oldest form of torture.
You're gonna have some church folks come in here and deliver some gifts.
I'll be escorting the both of you through the cell block. I'm disappointed you're here, Sanchez.
Close 146.
Party time's over, ladies.
She's gotten worse, Danny. I'm so sorry, my friend.
She said to tell you the magic is back and the tree is talking.
And I heard what that girl from the church said to you.
Maybe it's not such a coincidence that you're in the cell next to me, huh?
The only thing that makes sense in this world is friends, man. And family.
It's all about easing Georgia's pain.
We're just asking for a chance to see her one last time.
You have to believe that we're going to see your mother together. Is born this day in the city of David a savior. That's what Christmas is all about, right?
It's a magic tree.
I'm running out of time.
My hands are tied.
We're not finished.
You need to clean yourself up and start acting like a husband and a father.
Thought we were gonna lose her last night.
She's got to hold on just a little bit longer.
My son will be here.
You're my brother, man. I love you.
I'd say you did something really nice tonight.
Man, I get so excited, choked up, emotional watching that, Robert. That was the first time you'd seen that one, is it not? Yeah.
Yeah.
So there you are playing Mouse Sanchez in a film that people who know me know that the film is about a woman who gets cancer. Her son freaks out, robs a bank to pay for her medical bills, finds himself in prison in the cell next to you, Mr. Robert Lasardo, Mouse Sanchez. I want to spend the next chunk of time talking about this film, your experience, my experience with you. But I'm going to leave it open to you right now, Robert. What would you like to say about this film?
I think given the state of consciousness of our society right now, especially in the United States and around the world, I think a movie like this is needed.
Yeah.
In terms of the message that it communicates.
Absolutely.
In a very unauthoritarian, but subtle and loving and forgiving way. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Necessary.
I'm watching the people comment on the trailer right now. That's the first time they'd seen it. They feel the same way. My experience was that you came to the set day one. We can't spoil the movie. You filmed a scene that day. And then I looked at my old notes today. You were with me the next 2, 3, 4 days, took a day off. But a lot of the scenes we filmed first, actually all the scenes you and I filmed first together, were in the jail cell, where if you just watched the trailer without audio, you would think, okay, Robert's potentially playing one of those guys. That's the heavy, but that's not your character at all. And there's so much depth to Mouse. That character to me speaks volumes to who you are as a man. But who is Mouse Sanchez to you, Robert?
Well, in this film, it's an opportunity to go on to the next aspect of any man who finds himself, the person finds himself incarcerated or locked up in a situation where they've made some poor choices. I think the only difference, well, I won't minimize the film, but I would say, to speak to part of your comment about this having depth, I'd like to say, with respect to some of the characters I've played in the past, that they all have depth. I think, though, the difference in this case is that I'm allowed to experience as that character an opportunity to be forgiven by the writers and those who created this story. allow the character to move into a direction that does not communicate the barbarism or the lack of insight. This is a character that recognizes the flaw of his past life and the poor choices and mistakes that potentially have led him into this situation, and recognizes now the importance of shifting attention toward life in a way that is appealing, and especially to the character of Danny, who's stuck, in this hell with him, opposite, on the other side of the wall. It's ironic to me that Sanchez becomes the voice of reason because he knows, he's been there. He knows about the peril of that life that brings people down into situations of disparity. So I think that it's perfect that this character have that experience, but then can utilize it to teach someone else. Okay, I get it. I understand. I've been there, but let's shift our focus on something positive. Let's discuss the possibility of all sorts of things that do not communicate misery, but hope for the holiday, even, this idea that, love ultimately will lead us out of this self-imposed hell that we've created, others have created for us. If we have faith and believe, then the doors will open. And I think this movie, more so than just an allegory or a metaphor for that possibility, demonstrates realistically how that could actually happen if you simply make the efforts to really change the way you think and do things. That's infectious and contagious. And I think that's what Sanchez is trying to get through to Danny's character, not to fall into this well of despair, but to help pull him out and promise him that if he believes, he will see his mother again one day.
Absolutely. Your character is exactly what you just said. It's the hope center of the film. There's a lot going around in the film where people are wanting things to happen. Prayers are being said. Your character is, in my opinion, the Holy Spirit in the film. You are breathing life into your, he's not your cellmate, but the guy in the cell next to you, which then gives him hope for the events that are happening in the movie. And I will tell you this, one of my favorite memories from that film and that experience, because when you work on a film, I don't know about for you, but for me, I've done 2 now, and you work for 3 weeks on the set, and then you go home and everything's kind of like a blur. Everything is like, wow, did that happen on day 1 or day 14? So there's a lot of blurry stuff, but things I remember specifically are sitting down with you prior to the cameras rolling while they're setting lights up and people are eating and things like that, and you and I having these incredibly deep discussions about what is this scene trying to convey. What is Mouse trying to say here? And then you would say things like, Ricky, what do you think about this? And so for me, having had the script in my hand for 18 months, and then sitting with you who did not have the script for that long, hearing your voice and your thoughts and your opinion on those things, really for me was mind-blowing, because I had thought the character was going to go one way, and then you bring this incredible different light to Mouse. So I just want to say thank you, first of all, for the discussions we had. But has that been your typical experience on film sets, being able to have that much ability to, I don't want to say the word tweak, but change and manipulate the character to fit the narrative better?
Well, if there's an opportunity to do that, I mean, I'll do my best to add things if I'm allowed. I will speak to this experience regarding that, and I want to say that I appreciate that you allowed me, and that the governing entities allowed me to explore the possibility of things that were not on the page. I mean, as you witnessed, we, I think, had an idea and understanding of what this character suggested, but with further investigation, I think I discovered that there was more that needed to be said. So I appreciate that you let me literally go off the page in terms of screenplay and just start ad-libbing a whole monologue that I felt was indicative of what Sanchez was struggling with in terms of forgiving his father, his past life, recognizing that after all is said and done, family and friends are the true reward not this idea of material gain or this ultimate lottery ticket, that without love and family or friends, that you kind of sit in this isolation, similar to this metaphor that we paint in the frame of prison. There's all sorts of prisons. It doesn't have to be a correctional facility, literally. There's a lot of people that feel disconnected, unloved, and cut off from life for reasons sometimes that are out of their control, or things that they do themselves, that they wake up one day and they realize, oh my God, what have I done?
Yeah.
Where is everyone? And I think Mouse has that exact realization. He wakes up one day and he says to Danny, one day you wake up and where is it? Where is everyone? You realize there's nobody left. And so, but there's an opportunity. What does it say? I think in the Bible, a brother is born for adversity. So suddenly they become brothers in this such challenging circumstance, and this kind of love affair, so to speak, develops. And there's hope that will be the seed planted to move on. So I think it's great. And there's nothing typical about a situation where you can add to something that's already there for the sake of the piece, not for the self-serving sake of vanity, but simply that if you really want to go to a place so that the audience can relate to what the writing communicates and the ideology behind the movie, then why not go all the way? Why just scratch the surface?
Yeah.
You got to really dig deep, because then if you feel it completely, then the audience will. That's my theory. It's like people want all or nothing. They don't want a facade. They want to be lifted out of their 90 minutes of whatever. The reason why we watch movies is to be kind of transported into this world where anything's possible. Negative, nightmares, dreams, pick one. In this case, I felt fortunate to be invited into a situation where I could participate in something that was auspicious, not dire, not indicative of the human condition gone awry, but more the celebration of life and the possibility of what could manifest if people just start caring for one another or see what's important. So to me, it's nothing typical at all about this situation, or the desire to go to the next level in terms of performance. There's nothing typical.
Yeah. Robert, you mentioned a minute ago something that happened during the course of the film. It was my worst nightmare as a first-time director, and I debated whether I wanted to tell this now or show and then tell. I'm going to tell it now, then we'll show. But day 2, we had an incredible opportunity to give you, in terms of giving a monologue. Oh, okay. You don't want me to say?
May I make a suggestion?
Yes.
My suggestion is show the clip and then tell the story.
Let's do it. Amen. Brian, please roll that clip.
So what do you think you'll do when you get on the outside for Christmas?
I don't know, man. Maybe I might do something really crazy, like call my old man, call my dad. Tell him I love him. Maybe he won't hang up on me this time. If I could just have a moment, to share with him what I realize now, we could bury that history that we have, and I don't know, maybe, and share Christmas together, man. That would be nice. I like that. It's a lot of people, man, that I really miss, Danny. You wake up one day and there's just nobody left. You start to realize that the only thing that makes sense in this world is friends, man, and family.
Robert. Oh, so here's the story about that scene. I'm a first-time director. We filmed the scene on day 2. You did an excellent, incredible job. Very happy with it. I'm the type of director, if I like what I see, we move on. I'm not Terrence Malick. We don't need to do 94 takes. We moved on. The next morning I get to the set, my director of photography comes up to me with my script supervisor and says, "Hey, Ricky, we've got really bad news." I'm like, "Okay, so the food's going to be late or something." They go, "That entire scene we shot with Robert is unusable." And I said, "Well, what do you mean unusable?" And they said there was a problem with some sort of mechanism on the camera. The footage is extremely grainy. And I said, "Well, that can't be the case. Let me see the footage." They pulled up the footage on the iPad, and sure enough, it was unusable. Would not ever be saved. I approached you, albeit a little apprehensive, and said, "Robert, here's what happened." And we got through it. You and I got through it, and we recorded it again. And I told you that day, and I still say it now, and people have now seen that was 90 seconds. That scene takes about 3 minutes. It was better the second time by leaps and bounds. I believe that it was a blessing in disguise, because when you did it the second time, there was more emotion and almost a recall of what you had talked about before. So I'm going to stop talking about it. I'm going to give you an opportunity to talk about what that was like on your end, having to redo it.
Well, I think it's important not to get attached to the results of your work in general. I would say this to all artists, whether you're dealing with the business model of appearance and striving after perfection and what the Disneyland of film is, the superficial aspects, or you're just obsessive artist who's striving for perfection and in the work itself and not concerned about where it sits on the level, on the different levels of observation in relationship to merit, the things that people base judgment on in the industry. Is it a big film? Is it what studio? Is it an independent film? Who's in it? All these this formula of measurement that seems to devalue the artist's relationship to the work. So I think it was an opportunity for me in that circumstance to just once again let it go, because it's the same with everything. I mean, you do films, and you don't go into a film situation making a movie saying, "Well, I hope this is a really awful movie. I really hope that the editors screw it up in the editorial. I hope the director is incompetent." You don't go in with this intention. You go in with the best intentions, and sometimes that leads you to hell, like a saying indicates. And you're just one hand on a canvas, and ultimately you can't control all the other strokes that make up the totality of the image. Yeah. So it's been my experience that I definitely have to let go of the result of my work, of all the other variables that produce the thing, and just say, okay, well, I did my best, and you just kind of move on.
Yeah.
So you practice this detachment over time to save your sanity.
Yeah.
And I would say, I know this, maybe it sounds redundant at this point, but I think I would really strongly suggest this to all people pursuing a career in this profession of performing arts, whatever it is, dance, music, acting, to just not get too attached to the results of your work, regardless of how they communicate. If they're effective in the realm and people say, "Wow, that was amazing," and blown away by it, it's still just a temporary state. And I communicate this theory or this philosophy from the spiritual end, not the commercial end, of people who want to covet their glory and their trophies in which they feel that they have won something because they've appeared in a circumstance of show that the critics enjoy, that are celebrating. The population has basically chimed in and said, "Okay, this is a winner." All these things are wonderful, I guess, until they're not.
Right.
Because ultimately you have to let it go. So whether it's a good experience, a bad experience, it's all opportunities to learn something. And I think for me, the lesson is to let go. And also to try your best to embody what the job requires, or the character requires, what the director requires, what the writing indicates. It's an opportunity to do your best job. And in this case, I was given an opportunity to detach once again and say, okay, I've got to wipe the slate clean and forget everything from the day before. And that's what I was taught in school. My teacher used to say, okay, the real trick is to this repetitive show, but without the memory of what occurred prior.
Yeah.
So it's almost every time, if it's 100 times, it's as if you said it for the first time. The
Yeah.
real trick is to embody that disposition in relationship to the writing brand new every single time. And it's an exhausting process. Clearly, when, for me specifically, in the frame of that circumstance, because there was so much emotion on the line that needed to be conveyed so that Danny could be affected through the stone wall and feel moved by what this catharsis that Sanchez was experiencing in that moment. And I think for me as a person in my own life, not to get too personal, I think it was also a way for me to exercise certain frustrations I've had about my life, like we all have them, and utilize that frame and story and be a little selfish, but for the sake of the piece, because there was a parallel.
Yeah.
And so I reached into a real place. And I think that in that sense, your comment about it being a blessing in disguise is completely true. And it was just an opportunity to do it again, which is what it's about. You do it again. And then even with that, whether the scene is successful or not, you let it go and you detach, and you hope that whoever watches this film, or the various sequences that string together to make the entire movie, can feel something and be affected by it, and that's it. And then you move on. You let it go.
My pastor, mentor, and spiritual father, who are the same person, tells me all the time, the project isn't the film I'm working on or the person I'm with. The project is always me. And how do I respond to things when they don't go my way? If the camera breaks or if my car breaks down or whatever, the project is me. I'm constantly the project in motion. And so you handled that with grace that day. And we got something beautiful out of it, Robert. And I want to thank you for that.
Hey, the show must go on.
Right? Yeah. And the other thing
must go on.
The other thing you said a minute ago that reminded me of a discussion you and I had about a year ago is The Mule had just come out that you were in with Clint Eastwood, and people were giving you a bunch of accolades and praise. But the reality is, you and I both feel the same way about this. That's gone. By the time that film comes out, that's already done and over with. We've moved on. We're on to the next thing. And while we're grateful for the accolade and praise, we're already thinking about the next thing. And so I wanted to mention that we have a lot of.
Can I speak to that real quick?
Yes, please. Absolutely.
I'll make it brief. Yeah. I think it's important not to get hung up on this idea of past glory, especially when you're making a new film, because it robs the present of what's required, and you cannot. I'll give you an example, like high school prom. Mm-hmm. You can take one date, not two. You take one date to the prom. Yeah. So each time you find yourself on a set with a director, you're at the prom. You're not going to bring your other date. You're going to bring the one. You're loyal to that director. You don't infringe on that stage by introducing an element that has nothing to do with what you're creating in the moment. It's a form of betrayal, I think. And I know I'm extreme in my thinking, clearly, but people are very blasé about it, and that's fine. I'm not knocking it, but I feel it interferes and sometimes can intimidate directors or people who are focusing on what's at hand now. Let's focus on this, not that.
Yeah. There's an intimacy there. Yeah, I agree with you, Robert. We have audience questions. People are dying to ask you some things, so we'd love to get to those right now.
Okay.
This is from Tabitha. How do you deal with or overcome that instinct the industry has in typecasting you when you know you have so much more to offer? When they sum you up by how you look instead of on your talent and ability, how do you deal with that is her question.
I think over time you learn, or I have learned, not to make it relevant. And then when you recognize that it's not relevant, it doesn't faze you anymore. Like I said earlier, it's important to develop a relationship with the material, the writing, and find elements of what's occurring in it that the writers have failed to see.
Mm-hmm.
And in that sense, you introduce your own quality, your own magic. And in that sense, there's nothing limiting or stifling about that. This idea of stereotype and cliche basically means that what's being communicated is incoherent, two-dimensional, has nothing going on in it, and it's a facade. Well, if you see yourself that way, then you'll manifest that. But if you do not see yourself that way, and you allow this wellspring of what you are to manifest, the camera reads truth. So it's, people don't remember entire movies; they remember moments in film. And so if it's about not how much time you have in the film or what you're doing or how they've defined you, it's what you do at that time that makes impact.
Yeah.
And that's the key. So don't be concerned about how you're perceived. Concern yourself more with how you can utilize your imagination to add things that are not present on the page, and subtly sneak into the minds of those who've created this limitation around you to reconsider that maybe there's more going on there than what they originally imagined, despite how it appears before them.
Absolutely.
That's been my experience lately.
One
the
of the
roles
things
are changing.
Yeah, one of the things I heard
the roles are changing.
They are changing, and one of the things I heard you say to me the other day when we spoke was that no matter what role you're in or film you're in, whether someone perceives it to be something you did before that was similar, the circumstances surrounding it are different. You are acting with different people. You're on a different set. The plot of the movie is different. You're never, ever involved in the same exact situation you were before. All right, let's get to another question, Brian. All right, this is from Mino. What advice can you give to an actor like me that has been in some films but hasn't gotten his breakout film? I don't know a lot of important people in the film industry, but I have a top-tier agent. What would you give advice to him about?
Be true to the art. Be true to the art form itself. Words like breakout, to me, are dangerous. Because that terminology concerns me only because it creates a goal-orientated struggle where you arrive at some place, right? Okay, so say you arrive there, you have this breakout moment. Then the challenge always is that, well, I have to have a series of more breakout moments so that I can maintain the station. And there's a lot of anxiety that comes about when you're preoccupied with how you appear in the realm of show. I mean, I understand the business model versus the creative model. The business model is always concerned, okay, what's my rank? Where do I stand in the profession? Am I big? Am I small? I want to become big one day. This speaks to the ego. This speaks to narcissism. This speaks into looking in the mirror at oneself and wanting to somehow be allowed the opportunity to participate on the grand stage, as if somehow that will liberate the artist into a state of consciousness that will free them one day. I don't believe in that. It doesn't work. I've seen actors who've risen and fallen based on that model, who still are in love with the art form. They enjoy making movies. They have not been robbed of the experience of just doing the work and having this like liberated consciousness occur, where they forget about their lives, they're doing the scene, they're involved in collaborating with other artists and just having a really good time. To me, that's the goal, not to break out, not to blow up, but to simply do the work. And if it's meant ultimately within the business frame for you to be promoted, then you will. If the agent isn't doing the job, then you just continue to find ways to influence people in positions of power so that you can be allowed opportunity to create on a level that you feel is appropriate for your talent. But what I'm saying is, even if that's achieved, don't get confused and somehow think that that's somehow going to bring you this special feeling. There is no special feeling. To me, the only special feeling is nailing the scene perfectly.
Yeah.
That's it.
Amen.
And even that you can't hold on to.
That's right. And I would add very briefly to that, what is the reason you're wanting to be an actor or in the business? If it's to get fame and fortune, I would argue that those are the wrong reasons. So I will end with that statement. Robert, we have 3 more minutes. I'm going to allow one more question. So Brian, if you could have one more question pop up for us. Oh, Brian himself is coming up. All right, here we go. You there, Brian?
Sorry, I'm adding myself in here because I have to show a picture that I mean, Robert was in one of my favorite movies of all time, and you know, being the behind the scenes guy, I get the good fortune of getting to show some pictures here, and now it's escaping my system, of course, because that's how the convenience of timing works. All right, so here we go.
Oh, I know that movie.
I just had to start. So my question is you've been from moving and Short Circuit 2 there, and you've been in some films that have lasted the test of time and have had some very impactful moments for people. How does that part of working in the arts resonate for you?
How does it resonate? I think that a particular property or movie that lives within the timeline effectively is one thing. I think the artistic aspects of what is present now is something else. The two to me don't meet. They're separate, or I guess they coexist to some extent. But I guess it's kind of like this comment that they made about Jimi Hendrix. Once he did a song or did something, regardless of its impact, it doesn't live in the mind of the artist anymore. He's kind of moved on to the next thing. And if these, and from the subjective positioning of those who look at these movies that are affected by them, then that's a personal thing. That's your projection. That's something that has to do with you. How it affects me is a different matter. The things that other people champion in terms of what my career suggests may not be the way I feel.
Yeah, that's true. That's a very good point. Robert, we are going to wrap up with our TV audience in Sacramento right now. I'd love to stay with you on for about another 10 minutes or so and talk about your other projects that we haven't got to yet, if you're willing. Awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
So everyone in Sacramento, thank you so much for tuning in tonight, to listening to Robert and I wax poetic about film. I hope you learn more about this man that I care about, that is going to just knock your socks off with this performance in The Talking Tree. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Casting Calls America. And we will see you guys next week or the week after. All right, we are back with Robert Lasardo. Thank you for being here. Robert's going to join us again shortly. His conversation with me was so robust, we didn't get an opportunity to discuss everything that was on our plate. Brian, are you there?
I am here. Sorry, it looks like Robert dropped off for just a second there, transitioning. But yeah, that was that. I mean, so far, absolutely fascinating, and I love his mentality on addressing kind of the really art focus, but still being conscious and aware of the importance of the business side. It seems like he has a very level-headed viewpoint of the world in which he lives in.
Yeah, he blew me away with his depth and how he conducted himself on set, because as Tabitha asked, sometimes you get typecast and people think, oh, this guy can only do these certain things in film and television, and that's simply not the case. So Robert is asking me to send the link again, so I'm going to copy and paste the link. Brian, if you want to talk for a second while I do that for him.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to throw up, with some of the material that we had from Robert. I think his book. I haven't read it yet, but I know you have. It sounds absolutely fascinating.
It's no holds barred. It is pedal to the metal. It is his life story unfiltered. It is. It's an incredible look into the man and his method. And I can hold it up if you want to take away the graphic. Here's something that was really special for me. So day 3, I didn't know he had a book, and he walked over to me and he inscribed it to me and just put some words in there for me that really meant a lot. So if you have an opportunity to click on the link and get that book, you're going to learn a lot about acting. You're going to learn a lot about Robert. You're going to learn a lot about a lot of things. What we're going to talk about when he does come back is he has got a film and a book coming out. The film's not coming. The book is coming out called Gabriel's Trial. And I don't want to say it's semi-autobiographical, but it is very, you can see Robert in that character. The book hopefully will be out before the end of the year. I'm going to let him talk about that. And also the film will get made at some point. But it's a really, for me, Robert, I'm talking about Gabriel's Trial. When I read the script, and we just started talking about it, by the way, when I read the script, it blew me away in terms of the genre. There is nothing like this out there yet. So we just showed a graphic, Brian. If you want to throw up that graphic of Gabriel's Trial that we gave earlier, it is a book that will be out before the end of the year, hopefully, and then a film after that. But Robert, what is Gabriel's Trial? Why are you so passionate about it? And just anything else you want to say about it?
Well, I think it speaks to this, once again, this idea of reclamation and being honest, even if sometimes the truth is ugly. This particular story, I think, was inspired because of love.
Mm-hmm.
Love. I think it's a love story. Ultimately, it may have to move through murky waters to ultimately reach its goal. But what great love story hasn't? Yeah. So I think it was important to me to write something that I felt was honest, almost like a confession, and create a character that embodied a lot of the qualities that people over time associate my character with, and then take that character on a journey and place him in familiar circumstances, suspicious, nefarious, suspected of murder, involved in something witchy. Characters appearing suddenly that are either friendly or not so friendly. And what is his participation in all this? Is he the master puppeteer of such terrible doings, or is he simply its victim trying to find his own way out, and then meets people that ultimately are there to help him or possibly hinder him, and faces this trial on two domains: the earthly realm, which is the physical trial, where he's basically accused of basically murdering someone, and also this spiritual realm in which he has to face another type of reckoning, ultimately with his own soul or spirit, and what potentially he may or may not have done, or the sorrow or sadness he feels about issues of his life, and then ultimately has to come to terms with it. And he has a close friend who believes in him to a point, and then and is willing to go down the rabbit hole in terms of circumstance and what the plot suggests about him being involved in this young girl's disappearance, and being involved in some not so nice things. So the friend is willing to embrace his brother, my character, and consider the possibility that the accusations are not true. And so I wanted to tell a story like this that ultimately, without giving away the ending, presents the audience with something to look at and consider. Forgiveness, despite the conclusion, and how things can be misinterpreted based on appearance. Because Gabriel's a tattoo artist who works at a local tattoo shop with his close friend Simon, who follows him down the rabbit hole. And they're the victim of prejudice about the tattooing culture, even though nowadays, in most places it's considered hip and trendy and cool. There's still some pockets in the South, in places where they've hung and murdered people for witchcraft hundreds of years ago, that still resonate with this kind of superstition that carries over into obsession in relationship to God and wanting to attack what they believe to be evil. And Gabriel is the focal point of this potential evil as a possible predator, or maybe not. And so I wanted to create a controversial story in that sense, where things aren't what they appear to be, because as you get to know people, appearances are not to be even evaluated. I think it's more of the heart and spirit of the person that you see ultimately, or right away. If you have the ability to recognize the heart of humanity, you're not you're not manipulated by what the appearance suggests based on the programming you've been trained to believe through other people who have limited sight as well. And so that's why also I felt it necessary to set the story of Gabriel's trial within the framework of a tattoo situation, because the tattoos for many years have been perceived as anathema, like a curse, indicating something foul, something not so holy. And so I wanted to expose that in a truth, not to lay blame to those who perceive the tattoo as ill-fitting, but to deal with that conflict honestly, and what a person who wakes up one day and looks at these images and tries to understand what they really mean, and be honest about that. Because people for years have been asking me, Robert, what do the tattoos mean? What's your story, man? Like, tell. So I wanted to almost make the story autobiographical, but create a very real character independent of me that embodied the characteristics of situations in my life that I think needed to be told. And I'd like to believe people would relate to.
I think
especially when love is involved, especially when there's love.
I think people are going to relate to it. Before you hopped back on, I said this film, I think, almost defines a brand new genre. It is faith-based, biblically accurate, but at the same time dealing with things that no faith-based film has ever dealt with, but it's done in a way that's real and believable. And when I read my Bible, there are things in there that typical faith-based movies and typical faith-based moviegoers don't want to hear or talk about. You were unafraid in the writing of your script in your book when it came to those things. And I think the way you did it is going to open eyes, but open eyes in a way that people are going to be awakened to things that perhaps they were afraid to think about, but now they're okay with, because they realize these things are true and these things are happening, and they don't have to be negative.
Agreed. And there's a lot of emphasis I see on the negative when it comes to some of the recent, storytelling out there, whether it's independent films or Hollywood stuff. There seems to be a tendency to always question the idea of love and God, or to put it under a microscope like it's some sort of mathematical or physics experiment, where to me God and love transcends anything that can be found under a microscope. Because if we relied completely on what conventional science dictates, then nothing would make sense in terms of how our relationships manifest in the way we love one another. There's nothing logical about any of this stuff. And I think in that, and that's where I think it's important to take the leap of faith in storytelling, and maybe combine elements in a way that's uncomfortable for certain people to watch who don't want to look at that stuff, but then not remove the most important aspect of the story, which is God or love and faith. All these things are present in this story. What I've noticed about some of the films I participated in that deal with the occult and this idea of the Satan and evil spirits and negative influence and this type of thing, that a lot of the characters are confused about their faith in relationship to the source condition, which is creating all of this. Whether you're a scientist that looks at it at a microcosmic level and say, energy is eternal and it can never end. Yeah, but where's love in all that? Where's love and where's God in all that? So I think when you figure out how to marry the two, it can be a very interesting experiment in communication, especially in an art form and in a story. And like I said, what I've noticed a lot in especially the thrillers or the horror movies is there's the absence of faith. There is the devil wins, this idea the evil will always continue to manifest. And I think it's a sad kind of statement that the scales are tipped so much. And what to me it speaks to that the writers sometimes are conflicted within themselves about where they stand in their own life. And so for them, it's a way to deal with this rage, this conflict, but not considering anything hopeful within that equation. So it just keeps replicating itself. The evil, like the serpent, keeps eating its tail forever. And there's never any resolve that indicates something liberating. And I wanted to do that with my story. I wanted to take the audience, so to speak, like Milton, long is the way and hard that out of hell leads up to light. I wanted to take the audience through this labyrinth of possibilities that are dire and maybe seemingly demonic, but ultimately at the apex of this experience, like the apostles, that they come to realize after a life of butchery that the only thing that ultimately made sense was liberation of the soul by grace of God and that relationship. And that's, to me, what's at the end of all of this. That's the only thing that's real.
Yeah.
Nothing else. That's reality to me.
Robert, before we ask Joanna's questions, I have one more quick thing, but we'll keep that question up because this is something quick I just wanted to say about Gabriel's trial, is that what I appreciated a lot about the script was that typical, and I think you said it, typical films in this vein, not genre, go one way and you expect one thing, but this really doesn't do any of the old tricks that those other films or scripts do. There's a lot of newness to this, and you made a lot of bold choices that I don't think people are going to see coming. So I'm excited to see this book.
I want to stay. Yeah, I think it's important to stay away from the violence, and if it serves a purpose to communicate the plot, fine. But I don't want to get hung up on this formula of violence, excessive violence, and things that don't really serve the story.
Yeah. Robert, Joanna Heckman, who looks like Wonder Woman in her profile picture, wants to know, what's your favorite all-time project that you've worked on?
That's I don't know if I have one. There's various situations professionally that have provided opportunity for me to learn the craft, because some of the directors and writers I've worked with were very gifted. So it's hard to pin it down. I will say that The Talking Tree, and I'm not just saying this because I'm speaking to you, Ricky, is one of my favorites, because I think it's one of the most honest situations for me to communicate a character without the limitations that have been placed on me by the writers. So I would say that for me spiritually has been the most profound experience. And then and then there's other stuff where the characters that I've been asked to portray are quite diabolical, and I was amazed when I look at them, like, wow, that's me. And so, I mean, there's been any number. It's hard for me to give. I mean, you're probably waiting for a specific answer. I know a lot of people.
I love this answer. No.
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to say. I mean, it was a pleasure working with Clint Eastwood. That was great. Working on the series Nip Tuck, all the coin, industry landmarks that indicate some form of success, I'm grateful for. If anybody asked me, well, you're going to minimize the fact that you stood across from Clint Eastwood, I would say no. It was a wonderful opportunity. It was fantastic, and I love that he allowed me the range to improvise with him, and he enjoyed what I was doing, because I felt working with him that he was very a jazz musician in the way he constructs the scene. He allows it to just be itself and see what happens, and he wants you to be courageous enough to move through your instinct and be present. And he's doing that with you, but at the same time also present to all the other elements of the scene, which makes him a genius. So it was, if anyone would have asked me years ago, or said to me, guess what, you're going to be standing opposite this man in a scene with him that's not just throwaway, that's actually part of the plot and a substantial character, I never would have believed that. Any more than I would have believed a year out of the Navy I'd be standing next to Richard Pryor in Moving, and him being so kind to me. So I'd say Moving was the first film that affected me, most profound experience in terms of being inspired to move forward. And so
And I would say, for me, if you would have told me a year prior to The Talking Tree that I would be on set with you, seeing your depth and your love for cinema and characters. You and I watched a couple movies while you were shooting on our off day that I would have also felt the same way you did. Robert, we have one more question that I'd like to get to, and then here. So Tabitha would like to know, in terms of casting, how do you get the casting directors to see you in roles they would or don't? So I guess what she's saying is, how do you tell your manager or your agent, look, I want to start going after these roles, or is it just kind of the luck of the draw?
A casting director, a good one, has the ability to recognize qualities within the artist or performer that others may have missed. So it's a tricky situation, because sometimes management, it's been my experience, management makes decisions that can harm a career. Casting directors don't always see it all. They miss stuff. And so I would say, once again, I know this sounds repetitive, but I would say, if you feel that you're able to authenticate the qualities that you possess of, within the structure of the scene, then do it. And if they see it, great. If they don't see it, then just find other. Hopefully, if the agent can't place you in a situation where you get to see a variety of casting directors who have, out of 5 of them, one of them has the ability to see, wait a minute, there's another quality in there, and wants to exploit that, then yeah. So if the agent or manager isn't doing their job, then try to see by networking if there's other casting directors in your network that you can send a reel to, a demo, you doing something, either in relationship to the material or just something in general that sparks their interest. Oh, wow, okay. It's just, you got to stay in it for a long time. I tell people, this is a marathon. This is not a sprint. You got to keep just showing up. Just show up. And if you don't like what you're seeing or hearing, then change the model. If a manager's not working for you, fire them. If the casting director's mocking you, because they've mocked me many times, I've showed up at auditions and the casting director said to my face, the messenger entrance is around back. And I'm like, I'm not here to deliver a package. So I get it. I feel you. So I would say, do not let anyone in those positions, even though they appear to be positions of merit because they're the casting director, does not mean that they are infallible and that they are not incompetent, because I've met a lot of casting directors that are incompetent, and a lot of filmmakers that are incompetent, and a lot of people who are supposed to champion this position and expect you to be perfect, and yet they can't even do what they ask you to do. So be careful with that judgment that they put upon you. I would say just do the work, continue to be as versatile as possible, and just bang on as many doors as you can. That's what I've been doing it for 32 years. No one just waved a magic wand and then suddenly I appeared in the talking tree. I've gone down a long road, of trial and tribulation, and I've been the punchline, I've been the punching bag for decades. It's only within the last 5 years that writers and producers and directors, Tabitha, have allowed me to finally show other aspects of my talent. And some casting directors are going, oh my God, I never saw him play a role like this. So they missed it too. Does that make them wrong? Or does it mean that they don't always have the insight to see more than what's placed in front of them?
Right.
And that's where you've got to get really clever and be persistent. Yeah.
Amen. Robert, I am just blown away by your answers tonight. I've learned so much. I love you like a brother. I am so thankful for you being in my film and our film. I'm excited for it to come out. Brian put the graphic. Casting Calls America. Thanks you, Robert. But this was incredibly enlightening for me, brother. And I hope we get to do it again soon sometime. And I hope sometime soon this year we get to see each other at the premiere of our film, because it is something special.
Amen.
All right.
Amen.
Thank you, Robert. Have a great rest of your night.
Thank you, sir. Good night.
Goodbye.